All right, good morning, everybody. Hopefully out there in the state, everybody can see us this morning. This is a little bit of a new venture of some of the things that we're hoping to be able to use as a training tool in the future. So you might notice a few things that are a little bit different than what we've done in the past. Some of you have been able to use Google Hangouts as a training tool. This is going to be really similar, except it's going to be recorded for future use. So forever and ever and all time, if you want to go back and review this training, you can do that. And there's going to be a few ways that you can do that. So one of the ways that you can do that is there should be a link that I've already sent you. If you click on that link again at a later date, you'll be able to review this as a recording. The other thing that you can do is you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is the training YouTube channel. That's the only thing that will be on there are training items. So if you see anything else on there, it did not come from me. But there is a channel there that these recordings will be posted on as well. So beyond that, I've also created a Google community, and you guys will get a little more information. And we've talked about this a little bit in some of our Google Hangouts, but in that community, you can go back and hopefully find any of these training items that we go over that are recorded. So the idea, hopefully, is that everybody will get a chance to participate in trainings, whether they're on vacation, out sick, a flood hits their office, because we know Lusk, that's you guys. Any of those things happen, we can go back and review those trainings. Or if we just flew through it way too fast and you felt like we went too quickly and you missed something, or you had that important phone call come in from a client, all those things you can go back and review. So hopefully most of the people in your office are able to view this right now. If they are having difficulties, and they're not able to see it live, we can always set that up to watch later as well. So supervisors, if you're viewing, just let your folks know that they can watch this as a later date, and we'll issue some instructions on that. So just a couple of things just on the training itself. Hopefully over in the left-hand corner of your screen or somewhere you can see something where you can type in or ask a question. We might not get to your question immediately, just because of the way the system works. If you ask a question, we probably won't see it just for a little while, and Corinne's going to help me out with that. And you might have a question pop up that had something to do with material that we've already covered, just because this system has a little bit of a built-in delay. At the end of the training, we will make sure to address any of the questions that you have. Today, I let you guys know that to only plan on about 45 minutes, and I want to make sure that we stay within that 45-minute time frame, so that if there are multiple questions, or if you feel like you need a little bit more additional training, please just email me afterwards, and we'll make sure to schedule a time when we can take just a little bit more individual one-on-one time, or make sure that your questions are answered, so that we all are feeling more comfortable with power. Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives us a good groundwork. So today, excuse me, last week we talked a little bit about power and some of the work requirements in the general application process. So we're going to kind of go into a little bit more. Today we're going to talk a little bit about changes, and we're also really going to focus on the epics portion of a power case. So as you work through a power case, this training, which was developed by Corinne, will have several examples of how to enter that information into epics. So I'm going to just share this with you on your screens. And again, this is just a continuation of what we started last week, just a little bit different format. So hopefully if you guys have technical issues, just let me know afterwards. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is actually just a little bit of a review from what we talked about last week, and adding a little bit more information on the 5-year limit. Remember that for individuals participating in POWER or TANF, there is a 5-year lifetime limit on the benefits that they can receive. Now, there are a few exceptions to that. Remember that this does not apply to caretaker relative cases. So if you're working in caretaker relative cases, you don't need to worry about limiting that household or that family to 5 years. It also does not apply to a case where the parent is an SSI recipient. So just kind of keep in mind, if you have parents that are receiving SSI, they are not limited to 5 years of POWER or TANF benefits. So if you're counting out of state time, we don't have to worry about that if we have a parent that's receiving SSI. It also does not count against children. So the case where this comes up is if you have a case where a child receives their 5 years under mom and then later on in life as an adult applies for cash assistance, either TANF or POWER if they're in Wyoming or any other state. The time that they receive TANF as a child or POWER as a child does not count. Okay, so you may run into this as you request information from other states where they say you have an individual that received POWER under a parent's case. We are not going to count those months. Okay, so keep that in mind. Also, if mom has hit a 5-year limit and his dad has not, the case cannot be listed with dad as the primary applicant. The PI has to receive 5 more years. Okay, so you might run into this type of situation where you have mom and dad in the household. One of them has hit the 5-year limit, one is not. Make sure that you set up the case so that the primary applicant or the PI is the person that has not received that 5-year limit.
Hey, Kelly, can I interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
Sorry, so this actually means that if you have a 2-parent household and one of the parents has 5 years, that the case is actually ineligible, even if dad does have a few more years under him. And so it is basically, if mom has 5 years, the case is ineligible.
Perfect. That's good. Okay, so I even read that wrong. That's awesome. All right, so also there can be certain situations where there are extensions that can be granted through the state office. So if you feel like you have an extenuating circumstance with a case or something's come up, just make sure that you contact Corinne Livers. She will be able to guide you through that process and let you know if there is some sort of extension that can be granted. Also, you need to count any months received in another state. So if they've received TANF in any other state besides Wyoming, we need to count those. Previously, the process was we would find that information out from their previous worker, or the previous state would send us the information on the months that they received TANF payments, and we would have to send that into Corinne and Bree, and they would manually enter that into Epix. Now with our brand new Tater screen, you guys can do that all on your own. So we did a walkthrough with this last week during the Uber conference, where it's very simple. Just go into the TATR screen, and once you're in there, you can enter in any past TANF benefits that your clients received. So it's really handy. I think Corinne's already stated that she's getting really good feedback on the Tater screen, but also just kind of if you have issues with that or questions on that, contact one of us and we can help you through that process. So also you need to make sure that you count months that an individual was in a $1 status. Now we are going to talk more about the $1 status and sanctions next week, but just remember that those count towards the 5-year limit. Okay, and also partial months count. So if you have a prorated month or a partial month that was received, those also count as well. So keep all of those things in mind. So that's kind of a review. So now a little bit more about POWER. Once you have somebody that signs up for a POWER case, remember that with a POWER case, our timeframes that we're typically used to with SNAP, little bit get thrown out the window, because with POWER, everything needs to be immediate. So that's one of the challenges with POWER, obviously, but it also makes it easy to know how to let our clients know about reporting requirements and how soon we need to act on information that comes into our office. Okay, so the only thing that isn't immediate with POWER is the actual payment, which is pay after performance. And I know many of you have used this term or know this term. So the POWER payment is only received after they have completed with everything. Everything else happens immediately. So that means that changes need to be reported as soon as participants become aware of the change. So if somebody has a change in income, finds a job, has any other change that may affect their case, they need to report that to us ASAP, which means as soon as they become aware that day, hopefully they call us and let us know that that's what's happening with their case, because those need to be also acted on immediately. So once we learn about that change, we no longer have 10 days to work that change. We need to make sure that it's acted on immediately. So that is a little bit of a challenge. So I would make sure that as your power caseload grows, you may put a little time into your calendar to make sure that you have time to act on any power changes that come into your office, or things that are reported that might affect a person's power case. Okay, and also referrals need to happen ASAP. And the referrals we're referring to here are referrals to the Department of Workforce Services and to child support. Those things also need to happen as soon as possible, because both child support and Department of Workforce Services have other requirements that they have to fulfill for our client to receive a power check, which need to be acted upon immediately. Okay, and then remember that for a power case, when we send notices out, even if it's for adverse action, only adequate notice is required, right? So instead of the notice that we have to send out 10 days ahead of time, adequate notice is from our manual. It's a notice of action informing the assistance unit of any type of increase or decrease, but it has to be received only no later than the date benefits would have been received. Okay, so keep that in mind, that you only need to send that out as long as that notice will arrive before benefits will have been received, or if there's a change, then you've sent out adequate notice on that. All right, so what does our client need to do in order to receive their power check? Okay, our client needs to cooperate with child support requirements, work requirements, and eligibility requirements to receive a check. And they have to do that for their initial month, just through the end of the initial month. Then they'll receive that first power check. In order to stay or continue to receive checks, they have to stay in compliance with all of those things: child support, work requirements, and eligibility requirements, and they will continue to receive a power check. Now, remember, those power checks are going to line up with the client's performance periods. So we will talk more about those performance periods next week, but it is a very good idea to sit down with your clients when you're explaining what they need to do in order to be successful with a power case, and talk about what performance periods line up with what payments, so that they know exactly how that system is going to work, so that they don't end up missing out on any of those power checks. We do want the power program, we do want that to be something that is helping our clients to succeed. We obviously want to make sure that they have as much information as possible so that they can be successful and work towards being that strong, independent person that's able to go out and find a job and provide for themselves and for their families. Okay. I'm going to take just a quick pause right here and just make sure. I did get one question that came in with somebody that's having a few sound issues. Hopefully most everybody can hear what's going on. If you are having sound issues, just a couple of things that you can double check. Just make sure, obviously, your speakers are plugged in, turned on, all of that good stuff. If there are multiple people having sound issues and we're having an issue with that, if you would please just send me a message either through this or somewhere else, and you can send up a question, however it may work. And I know I've got a few people that saying they are hearing okay. Again, we do anticipate that there's going to be a few technical issues today. So All right, so let's switch gears just a little bit, and I'm going to take just a second and pause and make sure that in that first initial part where we talked about not only the 5-year limit, but a little bit of what types of things people need to do to be successful. Is there anything else you can think of, Corinne, that I've missed, or anything else that you wanted to add to that portion of it?
Nope, I think you're good for right now.
Okay, great. It's perfect for me to have Corinne here just so I can double check all that stuff. All right, so moving on a little bit to the EPICS portion of it. Now, I realize that EPICS is one of the harder things to train on through the computer that's just showing you how to enter stuff in. I'm a real hands-on learner, and I know a lot of you guys are as well from working with you. So this can be used as a guide not only now but later. So if you would like to have access to this presentation, it's very simple. We can make sure that you can look at this at any time, or you can go back and watch this video again, just so that when you're entering your case into EPICS and you can't remember a certain code or where something goes in an EPICS case, you can kind of pop back into this and use it as a guide. Okay, so hopefully that will help a little bit. So using kind of Power and EPICS, hopefully if you are an EPICS master with Snap, most of this is going to be old hat to you. There are only a few changes that go along with the Power case that we'll talk about, Power specific screens, but most of it is, there's 2 places where you can find the information on what to enter. That is in these types of trainings and also in the combined manual. So if you're unsure of a code that needs to go next to a participation, then you can look in your combined manual as well. In this presentation as well, you'll find links that kind of go back and forth to the combined manual. So hopefully you'll be able to find all that stuff. The first screen that we have to set up correctly is the SEPA screen that sets up all our participation codes. So most of these are going to be very similar to what we use for a Snap case. If you code a client as in, the client is going to be included in that Power grant. Step parents are going to be coded ST. If you have parents of a minor parent, then it's DP is the code that you use. Sponsors of aliens, and obviously we were talking about the political kind and not the outer space kind, SP. But if you get an outer space kind, let me know. That's a good one to throw into some training. OU is an individual for whom 4E or other foster care payments are being made, or an immigrant who is ineligible because of the income of their sponsor or due to a sponsorship by an agency or organization. So OU codes, obviously we kind of use that as the out, that they are not going to be included there. But there are some certain requirements that you may want to review in that in that combined manual section 507, where you might code somebody as OU in a Power case as well. And DI is primary. Sorry, apparently my voice is changing today. DI is either a fugitive felon, which we don't run into that often, or an illegal immigrant or undocumented alien. That is something that we see quite often. So if you have somebody in that situation, just remember to also review your citizenship requirements. Remember that when you're looking at those citizenship requirements, that for a Power case, there is no 5-year waiting period for somebody that is a legal immigrant. So if you have a lawful permanent resident that applies for SNAP and hasn't been here 5 years, Power is a very good program to refer them to. However, if they are illegal, if they're undocumented, then they cannot be included in that Power case. So keep that kind of definition in mind when you're going to code this information into EPICS. So if they're illegal, they need to be coded differently for a Power case. Okay. So I did just have a question. Sorry to pause and interrupt. Jerry just sent me a question on once again how to access the question and answer. So and just a quick look on this, and I'm going to pick on Corinne. I'm sorry, you are going to be on my screen here, Corinne, for just a second and share it with everybody. If you
Thanks a
look
lot,
at my,
Kelly.
no problem. If you look at the screen over here on the left-hand side, you should see something that says Q&A. And hopefully if you click on that, you should be able to type your question into the box, and it should pop over there and we should be able to see the questions. And I know that a few people are having a few issues, but hopefully we can work through those. So this is a dual training. We all get trained on a new system as well. So, okay, so that's just a quick list of the DI codes, or not the DI codes, I'm sorry, the SEPA codes that you can use, including the DI code. So any of those that you enter in, when you look at this on your snap screen, and I'm sorry I missed one, which is the SS, so anybody that receives SSI would be coded as SS. So a quick look on that, how that's going to look on your Epic screen. Now obviously your Epic screen may have different colors than this, but this is hopefully what yours is going to look like. So when you go on here, if you notice right here, we have a power case that's been set up. We know it's power because when we look at the program, we see that it's AF for power. So when you look at the participation codes, you'll be able to see how these people are coded in. So when we have people coded as IN or in, they're included in that grant. We also have a parent that is not included in the grant in this situation, which is coded as OU. And then we also have a child that's receiving SSI. So in this household, we have the first parent and one of the children that are going to be included. One of the parents that is listed on that case that is coded as out for whatever reason. And again, those reasons can be found in your combined manual. And also, if you have an individual receiving SSI, they need to make sure that they have that SS code next to their name. All right. Okay, so another quick example on this as far as the next screen that we need to enter in information for a power case is the SSDO screen. So again, you guys are really familiar with filling this out, so I'm not going to take too much time on how to fill out this screen, but just remember a few things that go along with a power case. So first of all, if you have a two-parent family, Y must be by one of the adults in the household in this two-parent column. So the one that says 2P, that's for two-parent. So if we have a single parent household, that's going to be left blank. But if we have a two-parent household next to one of those parents, there needs to be a Y there to indicate that it's a two-parent household. Okay. Also, make sure that you double check the education level when you're entering it into a power case. This isn't as important with a snap case. We still want correct information into Epics, but it really doesn't affect us. But with a power case, it really can affect your client if we have this education level incorrect, because this is the information that may be tied to their work activity, one that's set up by their program or their manager over at Department of Workforce Services. So once they go and meet with their case manager, they're going to look at their education level as one of the factors that decide how they're going to put together their individual responsibility plan. Okay, so double check and make sure that's correct. Okay, so I do know that there's a few questions that have come in. Just remember, we're gonna touch base on those as soon as we finish, just because we're on a little bit of a delay. So if you've asked a question a minute or so ago, at the end, we'll kind of double check and go back to that. Okay, so also just another list of codes for you, the MARS status codes, really just a list: DI, divorced; LS, legally separated; married, never married; separated, widowed. And then this can also address temporary absence. So if you have a question on that, go ahead, read through it in the combined manual in section 609. We'll talk about that temporary absence, but we put that in this MARS screen. So when you're working through a power case, you're going to bump into the MARS screen, which is another great name. I don't know which I like better, Mars or Tater, but I'm leaning towards Tater. Right here, you'll notice we have a two-parent household. We have both the parents are married. Now, this is going to be important information for our case and how it works with a power case. So it is important that we have this information correct as well. And then next to the children, they have never been married, which is good in this case. But it just shows how to set up those codes when you go into this MARS screen that you may not have filled out previously if you haven't worked a power case before. Okay, the next screen we're going to look at is the PRAW screen. Okay, so this is going to look at any type of previous TANF statements. Go ahead.
Hey, Kelly, can I interrupt you for a second?
All you.
Thank you. Sorry, guys, but this one hasn't been updated yet since we've updated PRA and Tater. So the PRA that you guys see is the old one and not the new and shiny version that just went live last week. So we'll get that updated, and sorry about that.
Should I just skip through this screen then, Corinne?
Yeah, please do.
Okay.
Sorry, Kelly.
You guys will all get to see my cool animations of the arrows spinning in. I'll show that to you one more time, just so you can see that. All right, so that's a little side note. So do remember though that Tater screen is the new screen that we're using, and hopefully you guys all saw the walkthrough on that. And there's also going to be another video that's going to come out on that Tater screen within the next couple of weeks. So just know that if you missed that Uber conference or we sped through it too fast, that there is going to be just a little video walkthrough that you can go back and view. If you want some more individual time on that, we'll take that as well. So, all right, so the next kind of codes that we're going to look at are the SPRD screen, the deprivation codes. So you can also find this in EPICS if you go to the display table values in the system selection. That will show you all these. But it can list all the deprivation codes that are available. So this is a small sampling of the ones that are available because there are a lot. We're not going to take the time to go over all of those in this training today. But the most common ones that are kind of used are DI for divorced, LW looking for work, never married NM, unemployed parent UN. And then if you have an intact family, we put IF. So again, IF stands for intact family. So there's no child support issues. And we can put that code next to children with no child support issues. Okay, so just those are some of the common codes. If we went through that pretty quick and you aren't exactly sure where to put those, don't worry. When you work your next power case, it's going to ask you for that type of information on this SPRD screen. So when you go into that, notice we have just kind of a case that's been set up. 2 parents in this case and 2 children. So in this case, the first one is the specified relative that we have as the PI. So we notice we put a Y in that specified relative category right here. And also next to one of the children that we have the non-custodial parents information. So if you were setting this up for maybe a caretaker relative case and you had a child in that household that had a non-custodial parent involved in that case, you would put their information right here in this column. Okay. And then when you put in the code and it says deprivation cause, you are going to look for that deprivation code. So for in this example, it looks like we had the deprivation code of DI because the primary applicant is divorced from the father. So we have primary applicant that has been divorced from this child's father. And we put that information right there into the SPRD screen. Okay. For the next child, since we have a 2-parent household in this case, and this is a child in common, we're able to put intact family because there's no child support issues involved in that. So in this way, we can really look and see, and we need to make sure this is correct in a power case. We can really see the relationship between the parents in the household and any of the children that are also involved in that power grant case. The next screen that we look at is the Child Support Enforcement Agency screen. So this is what goes over there. So if you have that, a few of the codes that you can use when you put it in next to the parent is whether you're going to assign the rights to the state. So we know that with a power case, any child support received is most likely going to be assigned to the state of Wyoming. So Y is yes, EX is exempt if there's some reason for that. The CO is for cooperation, so that means they're cooperating with child support, and we need that code in to make sure that they are cooperating. If there's good cause that exists for non-cooperation, you would use a GC code. Now remember, we talked a little bit about good cause last week. Good cause needs to be granted by the state office. So if you have a client that feels like they have good cause to not do a child support referral, you would need to contact Corinne in that case. During that time that the state is making a determination on good cause, you can put this pended for good cause decision code, which is the PD. Okay. If you do have somebody that refuses to comply with child support, you can use RC as a code. And remember, as soon as we put that RC code in, we need to make sure that case goes into the sanction status, which we will talk about next week. Okay, and we also need to make sure we assign the child support rights next to the parent. So for reporting purposes, when this goes up for our federal partners, they pull information from our EPIC system in order to get the reports that they need. So in order for that to be correct, it needs to be listed next to the parent in this case. So just kind of a reminder on that, because I know it's a little bit different with a SNAP case when we code it in some of the other screens. Okay, so moving on just a little bit, we're just a quick refresher on assets and income, again with the power case. If you want to look more at assets, we could do an entire training on assets. It is in the combined manual, sections 800 through 807. We need to make sure and determine if an asset eligibility requirement is met for all family members living together and who are financially responsible for each other, and for others requesting to be included in the assistance unit. So anybody, remember that kind of financially responsible portion of that's how we're counting those asset limits. So this can especially apply to some of your caretaker relative cases, for example. Remember that for a power household, the combined asset limit is $2,500. This is different from our SNAP asset limit of $2,250. If you do have a client that is approaching that $2,500 limit, they remember that they are still eligible for SNAP as long as they are eligible for power. So they get the higher asset limit of $2,500. And that would include any of their liquid resources, other assets that are countable, and vehicles. So another reminder that vehicles still count for power. We can still exempt one vehicle, one duly licensed vehicle for a single parent household and two for a two-parent household. So remember to count those vehicles when we're looking at assets. Also income. Income, again, we can look at income most of the time the same way we look at it for SNAP, but we need to make sure we're counting any unearned income, educational unearned income, earned income, and self-employment income. All of those things still count, but the great news is now with the new income disregards of $600 and $1,200, you can have somebody that still has a small amount of income and be eligible for the power program. So this is a big change that's just started again this month. So clients that maybe historically have not been eligible for power because of their income may now be eligible just because of the new earned income disregards that are involved with that. All right, so just a quick note on sanctions. And again, we are not going to go into what sanctions a case, but just to talk a little bit about how it's going to work in EPICS. And we will talk more about this next week. And we may even review quickly how to enter this information into EPICS again. If you do have to put in a sanction code for somebody, just make sure that you can go back and review the sanction codes that are used. So if you use XW, it's going to mean that they're not meeting the work requirements or they've gone out of compliance. If you use XC as a code, it means that they are not in compliance with child support. And if you use XO, it means it's some sort of eligibility non-compliance. So any of those three factors can put our case into a status where they are being sanctioned. Okay. And then the sanction amount is $1 less than they would have been eligible for. So for example, if you had a household of 4, shelter included benefit would have been eligible for $546. So we put $545 as the sanction amount into EPICS. And this is our way of telling EPICS that the case needs to remain open, but they are in the $1 status. So again, if you have questions on this sanction and you're wondering what the $1 status is, stay tuned. Next week, we will talk a little bit more about that, but just remember that that is going to be how you code it into EPICS. And then the next screen we'll talk about is the WARWA screen. This is everybody's favorite screen, I know. You can look in the combined manual in section 718 for any EPICS coding, but just remember WARWA screen becomes really essential for a power case. We need to make sure that the WARWA screen is filled out correctly and for making sure that this is not only for reporting and auditing purposes that gets pulled from EPICS, but also for the information that goes to Department of Workforce Services. Okay, so just like when we're working a SNAP case, we code exempt applicants as YEX on the WARWA screen, and any mandatory people that need to go to be working with Department of Workforce Services are coded as NNE on the WARWA screen. So we also need to enter the appropriate code in the target field of WARWA. So just taking all that information and looking at, sorry, we'll get to that example in just a minute. So just a few more examples of some of the codes that you may need to enter. CP is a teen parent, CT is a 1-parent, 2-parent assistant unit must be CT. RA is an adult claiming to be incapacitated. WA is an adult claiming she is caring for an incapacitated immediate family member full-time. Okay. YC is a child not attending school, and YF is adult or member of an assistance unit fleeing because of being battered, subjected to extreme cruelty, or because of domestic violence. So if you run into any of these situations, which may cause either an exemption from the work requirements, then these are the codes that you might use. And then NT is all other individuals. So now we're looking at our example here. So if we look at our example family in our EPICS case, we can look over here and look at how those codes are being used. So for example, our primary applicant is a client not exempt from work performance requirements and needs to be referred to the Department of Workforce Services. Our second applicant is a client that is exempt from work performance requirements. So you notice that here we have NNE as the code, and we have received hard copy verification in this case. And in 2, we have YEX because they are exempt from that work requirement. Okay, and then in this target group, this is where we put those target codes that we talked about. And it identifies the individual into those target groups. Remember, this is important that we have this correct for reporting purposes. So NT is all other individuals. If you have one of these other circumstances, make sure you refer back to the previous table or the table in the combined manual to make sure that those are correct and we're using the correct code in those cases. Okay, and so just a reminder, this has to be complete on the same day as the application so that the case will be referred to the Department of Workforce Services. So this is what drives that information that's sent over there. So as you enter this in, remember our requirements for timeframes. Those, if you have that late power application on a Wednesday afternoon that we all look forward to, this needs to be entered in immediately, and they need to be referred over to the Department of Workforce Services immediately so they have that information. Okay, so just another quick example, just to buzz through it again. Obviously, this is the same information, but if you want to go back in and review this, you absolutely can. We have, again, another case where we have clients that are not exempt from workforce requirements. They're coded as the NNE. This is the information that's set up over to workforce services. And then we have a child in this case that is exempt. So we put them as YEX is exempt. We also make sure that we put the target information so that they're put in their target groups correctly. So in this case, CT indicates that this is a 1-parent and a 2-parent assistance unit. So since we have 1 parent there, and it's a 2-parent assistance unit, we put CT next to one of those parents. All right, and then NT next to the others. Okay, this EMH screen is going to be very similar to what we're used to. The one thing that we need to be aware of, and this is probably one of my biggest hangups whenever I work through a power case, so just keep in mind that if you're like me, you have to review this each time to make sure that you're right. Determine whether or not the assistance unit is eligible for either the shelter supplied maximum or shelter included maximum. So shelter supplied is when the assistance unit has no obligation to pay any portion of shelter costs. So they do not have to pay any rent, any mortgage, any portion of that rent or mortgage, anything like that. So it's completely furnished to them by a contribution. Somebody else is paying that amount for them, or they're living in a government housing subsidy. They can also, if there is an assistance unit with a minor parent and the dependent children of the household of a parent, or in a supervised setting, or an adult or court-appointed guardian or custodian. So that's another one where we would use the lower amount. Okay, if you also include a relative who is an SSI recipient, we use that shelter supplied benefit amount. For the shelter included benefit amount on the table, we want to make sure that we use this when an assistance unit does not meet the criteria for the shelter supplied maximum benefit level. So use the shelter included maximum benefit level and in-kind income when shelter is provided as earnings. So really just make sure that you're looking to find out if they fit into one of these categories to use. I'm sorry to click back on here. To use the shelter supplied maximum benefit or the shelter included. If they are paying rent or mortgage, then we are using that shelter included, which gives them a higher benefit amount. And this hopefully should make sense, but like I said, I always have to go back and just double check on that. Okay, so when we enter this information into the DEMH screen, make sure that you have this correct. If that's a shelter supplied, we want to make sure that we put a yes. Next to that, if it's not shelter supplied, we put a no. If they're receiving a minor or a housing subsidy, we put an R. If it's a minor parent, we put an M. And if there's an SSI person in the household, we put an S. So that's going to determine what type of benefit that they receive. If we have that incorrect, then what they will receive is an amount lower or higher than what they should receive. So we want to make sure that that is correct on here. Okay, and then that also determines their eligibility based on table 2, that power income guideline table. All right, so we kind of breezed through that part of it as well. Just a quick notice on notices. We want to make sure that we are specific in our notices as to the action taken on a case. So obviously we know this from the SNAP world, but we want to make sure this is carried over into our power notices as well. We want to be specific. We want to make sure that our notices are clear and that there's no question on to what our clients would need to bring us or to do. Okay, and we want to make sure that the notice is the most accurate for the action you're taking. So just like with the SNAP case, and I know I've used this analogy with some of you already, we want to make sure with our notices that we are never trying to fit a round peg notice into a square hole. So if a notice almost makes sense, that is probably not the appropriate notice. It needs to make exact sense to our client. We send that out. So for example, in here, if a case is closing for excess income, we use the excess income closure notice, which is the A406. If it's not quite right, we may have to look at the other reasons notice or look through and make sure that we have the correct notice that's going to go out to our client. Okay, and then to satisfy our federal requirements, an appropriate closure or denial notice must always be sent once a case is closed or denied. A non-compliance notice, which is the A710, notifies that the case is in a non-payment. A separate closure notice still has to be sent for closure. So if you have somebody that you sent that A710 notice that says they're in non-compliance and then you close that case, you will still need to send the appropriate closure notice as well. So make sure that you're sending the right notices with your power cases. Okay, and if a participant has not been notified that their case is sanctioned, and we'll talk about this again more next week, you cannot sanction that month. So for example, you sanction an individual and their case is placed in a $1 status for the month of April, and we send them a notice that April was the sanctioned month, and we continue to leave that in the $1 statement in the $1 status or that sanctioned status for May. That is not accurate because our client has not been notified. We need to close that case then, either for non-contact or for non-compliance, depending on that situation. We need to make sure that case is closed for the following month. You may have a case where they come back in and you would have to extend that. We will talk about that next week. In that case, we need to make sure that we send the appropriate sanction notice for that month as well. Okay, so it takes care of our presentation for today. Hopefully we had few technical issues, but I know that there are a few out there and we will make sure that we're dealing with them. So Corinne, is there anything else that you'd like to add or to clarify as we kind of finish up, and then we'll go over a few questions?
Hi, can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes.
I was having a heck of a time getting my microphone off unmute. Not right now. I can't really tell if there's been any questions that come in.
Okay, so I do have a couple questions that just came out over IM, people that are having a little bit of trouble. So one of the questions that came up, but this was from earlier in our presentation, is grandparents not in the grant does not want to cooperate with child support. Are the children still eligible?
If the grandparents, one of the pay after performance requirements for grandparent cases is they have to cooperate with child support. So they have a couple of options. One is they could claim good cause if there's some sort of safety reason that they do not want to seek child support either from mom or dad, or they have to cooperate with child support. There really isn't any other options for them.
Okay, and that really is the only question that I had pop up.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, you guys know where to find us if you think of anything else as we move through this process.
Okay, so that's all we have for you today. Again, thanks again for going through the new process. Thanks again for any feedback that you can offer to us on this. I do know that we obviously like a more individual setting, and we try to do that as much as possible. But where we wanted to do this as a review for everybody, this was the one way we could think of and make sure it gets out to everybody again. If you did have technical issues or something come up, feel free to contact me afterwards. Other than that, I'm going to thank you for your time. If you have any other questions that come up as you review this training, feel free to email either myself or Corinne, and we'll make sure that we get back to you, or give us a call or shoot us an IM. We will make sure that we are available. So thanks again, and that's all that I have.